Welcome back. Welcome back. Of course, Frost Over the World isn't all about presidents and prime ministers, fascinating as they may be. So, for example, a few weeks ago, I caught up with tennis ace Roger Federer, of Switzerland, of course, as he prepared for the ATP World Tour Finals, a competition which, incidentally, he went on to win. You're described as the, understandably, as the complete tennis player. Do you think, as of now, you are the complete tennis player, or are there parts of your game, aspects of your play, that you still think you can improve?
I mean, I still feel like I can still improve my volleys, my second serve, my backhand, my returning. You know, if it's not on power, then it's maybe just being consistent, you know, not just being consistent through a set, but then a match, and then the whole season, and so forth. You know, consistency is a funny thing, and for us it's very, very important as tennis players. So that's why I think we all strive to become better, and I think we actually push each other to become better, because nobody's just sleeping at home. Everybody's going to hitting the practice courts and trying to become a better player.
What is form and off form? I mean, it's curious. I mean, you have more on form days than anybody else, but do you know, on a day when you're going to be off form and you're not injured, do you know before you hit the first ball that it's going to be a difficult day?
Well, I mean, I think there is never a guarantee for any match that you're going to come out and play great. And sometimes you feel real bad going into a match, and then you realize you're actually playing the match of your life. And sometimes you feel wonderful going into the match, and then you realize it's just not your day. So I think the feeling you have shortly before the match, it's not like in school where you feel like you're perfectly prepared for a written test. You know, sometimes it just works and sometimes it doesn't. With us, obviously, the opponent has quite a big say as well. What's going to happen on your side of the net as well? And is he going to try something different, something he's maybe never done against you before? But I think the best players, they find a way to win regardless of who's opposite to the net. They just work, you know, their way through their own problems. And that's what I think I've done for many years, and really well, actually.
And are you conscious with certain players, in cricket it's fast bowlers who can psych batsmen to be scared of their bumpers or whatever like that. Are there certain players at certain moments that you know you've got a certain hold over them? You can psych them because of your service or because of your backhand or whatever. Do you have a moral control of them?
Well, I think maybe more just if the head-to-head is really one-sided, more than just my game. Sure, the occasional player doesn't like the way maybe I'm playing or the way I'm able to mix it up versus other players. That is the case, but then usually also the head-to-head speaks quite a clear language. And I just think if you have beaten a guy over 5 times, you know how to play that guy. You could have maybe lost 10 times, you know, or 15 times, but as long as you can beat a guy 5 times, that means you know how to play that player.
I see, yes, absolutely. And in terms of moving on from now to the future, do you think, you're incredibly young now, certainly compared to me, but in any case, do you think you can go on getting better to 28 to 30 to 35, or is it only a question of somehow keeping your extraordinary high standards now, or can you get better from here on?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I am a better player than when I won my first Wimbledon back in 2003, and this year I didn't win it. So, for instance, but I still feel like I'm a better player today. I'm more complete, I'm more powerful, I'm more experienced. There's so many things going for me today that back then was really a question mark. So
and physically you can still do, obviously. 28 now?
29, yeah. So I just turned 29.
So that you don't look a day over 28. But I mean, so that at that age you don't have to worry about. I mean, sometimes swimmers or divers get worried they're over the top, or.
No, I don't feel that way. I feel more like I just got to be careful for my fitness, that I stay healthy, that I don't get injured, that you know, have a schedule that allows me to have also breaks. I just got to be smart about everything I do now and learn from my mistakes. Whereas in the beginning you're looking for what you need to do. Now I know what I need to do to play well. Hollywood actress Geena Davis is running a campaign about the portrayal, the inadequate portrayal, of women as she sees it in the media. I spoke to her about it.
I had a bit of an epiphany when I did Thelma and Louise, actually when it came out, because I'd certainly had people recognize me, you know, maybe in the dry cleaner or something before, and they'd say something like, oh, you know, I love Beetlejuice or whatever. So I was used to that, but as soon as Thelma and Louise came out, it was very different, especially women would come up and sometimes grab my lapels to make sure I hear everything they say and talk about how much it meant to them. And that really was a great lesson in the power of media images, because it made me realize how few opportunities women have to feel like that coming out of a movie. And the very next movie I did was League of Their Own, and when that came out, I had 15-year-old girls coming up and telling me, oh my God, you know, that movie changed my life. I play sports because of that movie. So I had, fairly early on in my career, I had a very powerful lesson in the effects of media. So, and you know, listen, being in Hollywood, you see that there are far fewer parts for women. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just obvious and a fact of life.
Right, so you still think of Hollywood then as very much a man's world?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't have to think of it that way because, you know, we know what the numbers are. In fact, the percentage of female characters in films has been the same since 1946.
When former soldier turned award-winning musician James Blunt joined us here in the studio, I asked him about his recent bout of songwriter's block, as they call it, which had slowed his progress on his new album. What does that feel like? What is it? And how did you get out of it?
Yeah, I think what I felt is I had written two quite heavy, quite serious albums, and I wasn't really inspired to go and write a third that just repeated itself. And so although I would come to the piano and try and do bits and bobs, found it wasn't really inspiring me or doing anything, and so eventually I kind of gave up on that. And of course there is a certain nervousness that my record company are going to call up and say, where's the new album? And so actually then it took a bit of time to go away and find a new way of writing, and having done that, I've come back with an album which is much more upbeat and energetic and optimistic, and that's because really rather than one man and my acoustic guitar, I'm fronting a band now.
Right. So that was what helped to change the mood of the piece, as it were, the serious and the thoughtful replaced by the upbeat. And do you feel, as you did this album, did you feel more upbeat yourself?
Yeah, I think, you know, I probably count myself as being an 80s child, where in the 80s we had a great sense of optimism as that the human race could achieve great things, and then since that, in the 90s and the last decade, a kind of cynicism has kind of crept in everything that we read or the way we talk about certain things. And the reason I've enjoyed this album is it kind of stems back to where I feel I've come from, that sense of optimism, that naive, perhaps, sense of optimism of those years, or your teenage years where you feel that you can achieve anything.
And so, yes, so it's optimistic looking forward as well as just enjoying the present.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, these are the songs I've always wanted to write and the kind of music I'd like to listen to.
And in the meantime, you've also served in the forces. How long did you spend in the military? 6 years,
I was
it?
in the army for 6 years. They helped pay for my schooling, and so I owed them 4, and I found it a really interesting experience, and so I stayed on for an extra 2.
Did you have to fight? Were you nearly killed, or what?
I was out in the Kosovo conflict, which obviously was, you know, a dangerous environment. It was during the bombing campaign, and I was a reconnaissance soldier, and therefore much further forward than any of our politicians would like to admit at the time. And but I think it was a very different experience from the ones that the British soldiers are going through in Afghanistan at the moment.
How dangerous was it for you?
There were moments, obviously, where things were very dangerous. At the same time, I think ours it's a kind of limited experience in that, you know, we had weapons and we had vehicles to look after us. I think in all these scenarios, the people who I feel much more frightened for are the civilians, because it is the civilians who, and you see by the numbers, that they're the ones who suffer and who die in these large numbers compared to the soldiers. I
read also that you're planning possibly around Christmas to go to Afghanistan, which last time we talked about Afghanistan, you were planning to go there then, but what happened? You were blocked on the way there, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy going to visit different places because of my experience with the army, and to go and seeing to, the people who live in the country, all the soldiers, and also because of my connections with Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, again, who I think are a mind-blowing organisation. And so I went back to Kosovo to go and do a small concert there, and then I recently tried to go to Afghanistan. But with 120 soldiers, we failed to get in because of difficulties in the supply chain, really, because the funding is not at the front line, and so the aircraft were breaking down for 3 days. Eventually I was told I could go, but getting me home they said they would have to take some other soldiers off my flight, so they'd lose their R&R. And that stage I said, this is not the point of me being here. So yeah, I plan to go out and I'll go around at Christmas. And again, really just to say hello to some soldiers who I know are going through those tough times, but as I say, clock into, other people are there at the same time.
James Blunt there. If the level of your generosity is measured by how much money you give away, then America's wealthiest man, Bill Gates, is surely America's most generous person. I spoke to him about his life and his campaigns. Bill, when you were founding and starting Microsoft, did you ever imagine that years later you would be in a situation where the success of Microsoft enabled you to do all that you're doing now in terms of a huge philanthropic foundation for the needy lives of people all over the world? Was that any part of your dream when you started?
No, my dream was to build great software and create a tool of empowerment that would let you get at information and to hire friends and really push the magic of the chip to do great things. And I was deeply involved in doing the best software and creating a software industry, creating a personal computer industry. And it was only very late into that the size of the company and the value of my ownership in it struck me as something I needed to come up with a plan for.
And thank God you did, and thank God you did. And tell me, I mean, today, while you've been in New York, there have been the meetings of the Millennium Goals, the Millennium Development Goals. What you heard there, were you encouraged by that or alarmed by it? Is it doing as well as it ought to be doing?
Well, the Millennium Development Goals are a brilliant thing because they give us a report card on how the world as a whole is helping the people in deep deprivation, the poorest of the world. And by having that report card, we can make sure that all the resources, the United Nations groups, the different governments in these countries are doing the right things. And we can see where we're getting great results, learn from those, see where we're falling behind, and see what needs to be done. And so without the Millennium Development Goals, there really wasn't the level of coordination and visibility and full understanding of why the generosity that buys vaccines and buys bed nets and gets new seeds out to farmers, why those things are so important. We're doing actually quite well on the Millennium Development Goals. We won't achieve all of them. Africa is where it's always been the toughest, but even there's some great stories. The reduction in malaria deaths, the improvement in water access. We're doing quite well, and it's only 5 years until 2015. So we'll get the final grade there, but the job will go on with more energy because of how much progress we were able to make.
Perhaps the most moving interview of recent months was my encounter with Ingrid Betancourt. If you remember, the former presidential candidate in Colombia was taken hostage by FARC rebels in 2002 and spent 6.5 years in captivity before being finally freed. I first put to her the repeated accusations that she had ignored warnings that the FARC area was too unsafe for her.
I think that what happened is that at the time I was abducted, the government rewrote the story. And I couldn't just, I had no voice. I was kidnapped. And I think it happened because they were afraid that the media exposure of my kidnapping could trigger back against them. I think that if they really had warned me, and if they had really told me that this was a very dangerous place to go, they had all kind of, ways of preventing me to go. I went through a military checkpoint. They could have closed that checkpoint if it was what they thought it was or what they said they told me it was. But I went through this military checkpoint like everybody did. It was a normal traffic. I think that nobody, including the government, could foresee that the guerrilla was going to just install a roadblock in that place, because it was a highly militarized zone. The government and the president was going to the same place I was going to go, at the same day, at the same time. And he went in a helicopter and he had no problem. To go there, he had to just, be safe. But he needed to show to the people of Colombia and to the world that the army had regained control of the zone. So that's why nobody told me that this was a dangerous...
Nobody didn't tell you?
No. Afterwards, they pretended they had. But what really happened is that they withdraw my security.
But you knew they'd withdrawn your security.
Of course.
Why did you still go?
Well, because, Colombia is a very dangerous place all over the place. I mean, it's not like...
It's capital of kidnapping in the world.
Yeah, and at that time it was worse than today. And I had been all over Colombia campaigning in, dangerous places in a way. When the government took my security away, what people don't know is that it was a recent thing that they gave me, because for the 6 previous months I had no security at all, and I have been, campaigning without security. So now I had security, and when I was going to San Vicente, they withdraw the security, and I thought, if I don't go, if I accept not going because they withdraw my security, every time the government will want to prevent me from doing something, that's what they will do. And so what is the point of campaigning? The government will control my campaign.
Yes, because you were politically campaigning. So then comes the moment when you're abducted, when you're taken and so on. And how did they treat you? Did they treat you badly straight away, or did they treat you badly later?
It was a process of degradation, I would say. At the beginning, and it happened to all the groups I encountered in the jungle. I was not, for those 6 years, with the same group of persons. It just shifted. And what happened is that at the beginning, they would always feel interested in knowing me, in, trying to be kind, trying to answer whatever need I would have. But it happened that because we were in a secluded place, there was nobody around, no witnesses. They were armed, and I wasn't. So this kind of empowerment. Then the feeling that they were, obeying orders, that there was a hierarchy, so that they were not responsible directly. And also the pressure of their peers, We are the guerrillas, these guys are our enemies. And so little by little, they will shift, and it would trigger in them something that allow them to get cruel, and I would say sadistic. And it always happened. And so at the beginning, when you would have people that were nice to you, it was kind of frightening, because after a while you knew, because you had this experience for years, that these guys that were nice, you had to just try to keep the distance, because in a matter of months, they would become abusive.
How cruel did they become?
Well, the beating always was when there was a crisis. And crisis could happen at any moment. I remember one day I was coming from bathing, and the guard was behind me. And it was difficult for me to walk, because I had the things I had washed, my boots were full of water. it wasn't easy for me to move. And the guy was nasty. And he began pushing me with his rifle and saying, move, move, you're doing this on purpose. You want to make me late, move, move. And so I just turned around and I said to the guy, you touch me again and you are going to have problems with me. And then he was violent. I talked to the commander.
Violent how? With a weapon? Or
yeah,
with
with his rifle.
Yeah.
And this was something that, you know, at the beginning I would say, okay, I will behave. I'm a woman. I won't respond. And it came to a point once where it was at night and I need to ask permission to pee. And so I did. I had no answer. So I just, you know, got off the hammock and went to pee. I was chained by the neck, so peeing was in a bottle. I mean, I won't give you any details, but it was not easy. And then I heard this man, guard, saying, I'm going to put a bullet in your, I won't say the word, to teach you to ask permission when you go pee. And I really, I mean, it was so rude. So
it was terrifying.
Yeah, and I was like that. And all the night, I couldn't sleep thinking, what am I going to do? I can't. So in the morning, when the guard came to release me from the chain, just to go to the toilet and, you know, whatever, I asked him, who was at night here? And he said, it was me. And so I was very surprised because this guy was a nice guy, I thought. And so I said, oh, do you know who told me this? Did you hear when some guy said this to me? And he said, yes, it was me. And he was very proud. And my reaction, because of course I had been holding my reaction for a long time, I just grabbed him by the neck and I was, you know, and it was a small guy, he wasn't very big, and I was very furious. The end of the story is that I was chained for many years.
Chained for many years. And as time went by, what was the worst thing? Thinking that this ordeal might never end, that you might be in captivity for years and years, or the fear of death, that they would kill you?
You see, what happens is that perhaps in the first years of captivity, being alive is like your obsession. You want to be alive. But then, because your life lingers in this kind of very dark, you know, gloomy life, you begin to think that there are things more important than living. And especially for me, what was really important was not to lose what I thought I had to preserve. And at first, I didn't know how to express that, what I had to preserve. But it could be a sense of dignity, a sense of respect, something that I knew that was threatened because of the way they were treating us. So at the end, I would say that the fear was not the fear of dying, because it came to a point where perhaps death could be a good option, but it was the fear of having this situation continue for so long that I would be changed in a way that I wouldn't be myself again.
Ingrid Betancourt there, a memorable interview. Well, that's it for 2010. Do join me here in 7 days' time for the first Frost Over the World of 2011. What a historic moment. We'll see you then. Until then, goodbye.